and welcome to Cinemaholics, where we review the biggest and best films coming to theaters and streaming online. One of us is a film critic, one is a casual moviegoer, and the third person is me, your host, John Negroni from the Internet, California, as always. On the show today, we have from the Internet, Pennsylvania. He is a pop culture writer for Cinema Blend, and he is our film critic. You can find his reviews on the playlist, Cutprint Film, Hey You Guys, The Young Folks, and everything in between. It's Will Ashton.
Hello.
And from the Broadband Basement, he's our sound producer and casual moviegoer with the ticket stubs to not prove it. It's Soundmaster Maverick Hines.
Hello. It says to prove it in the script, sir.
I didn't want you to change it if you saw it.
Monster.
Yeah. Welcome back, Maverick. We've missed you.
Hey, yeah. Sorry I couldn't be on last week. My wife kind of threw me a little weekend of craziness for my birthday, so I wasn't able to see the film.
When you were supposed to see mid-90s.
Yeah, so I didn't know I wasn't going to be able to see it, so I had some fun celebrating my birthday with my wife and friends, so...
I was there too.
I missed you all. Well,
yeah, it was a fun party.
Sorry,
we were all there.
You're right, John. I forgot. Wife, friends, and John was there too.
Yeah, there you go. Well, we thought about FaceTiming you in, but you know.
I don't have your number still, so that was the problem.
I do. I just didn't,
You just didn't care.
You understand.
Yeah.
This week on the show, we're talking about Bohemian Rhapsody. Speaking about dysfunctional groups of people who do work together. Bohemian Rhapsody. This is the week. This is kind of an anticipated kind of movie for the world, biopic about Freddie Mercury. Before we get to that, I should say, of course, in our other reviews we have later, we're finally talking about Suspiria. We're going to talk about the Nutcracker in the Four Realms, The Haunting of Hill House, Wildlife, and Boy Erased. So a lot of reviews coming your way. Before we kick things off with Bohemian Rhapsody, real quick for off topics, we want to thank all of our patrons on Patreon. As always, you helped us decide what we reviewed this week and in what order. If you want to help us, we have a weekly Patreon review poll that we send out every week to our supporters, and they help us decide. Bohemian Rhapsody was picked over the Nutcracker, and it was also picked in favor of doing like a double feature. So thanks as always. And we have a quick question for all of you listeners. An opportunity came our way this past week to do something kind of different. Now, I know a lot of you are listening to this. That means that you like listening to this show. You don't want to just read the words, maybe. But we saw an opportunity that we could possibly invest financial resources in doing a transcribed review from Cinemaholics. It wouldn't be the entire episode, but there is a way for us to possibly send out to you listeners our reviews, but actually so you could read it online while you're, goofing off at work or something like that, or you're fiddling around on your phone. But we don't know if it's something that Cinemaholics listeners would actually care about. So we're asking you on this episode, please let us know. Email us cinemaholicspodcast@gmail.com, or go to one of our social pages. You can find them in the show notes and hit us up directly. Let us know. Would you actually want to read, like if we did our Bohemian Rhapsody, for example, we would just do a transcription of that conversation and you could read it. But we just don't know if there's any appetite for that. And I don't know a lot of podcasts that do this. Do you, Will?
I don't know. Like, besides, I think Smodcast does it, Kevin Smith's podcast. I remember reading about that somewhere. But other than that, I don't think I've heard any other shows actually pursue this. So it's kind of interesting to me.
It could be a unique thing. Yeah, we could be one of the first. Who knows? I know Maverick Hines, you don't even like listening to episodes of Cinemaholics already. So
yeah, barking up the wrong tree there, guy.
All right, without any further ado, let's talk about Bohemian Rhapsody. This is the latest wide release, big blockbustery music biopic from 20th Century Fox. It was directed by Bryan Singer initially, but we should say, this movie has been in talks to be made. It's been in production since, I want to say, like 2010 was when it initially was getting floated. I think pre-production started in around May, like 2012, something like that. You can correct me if I'm messing anything up, Will Ashton, but as far as I know, Dexter Fletcher actually was attached to this film at one point, and then he was dropped, and then they brought on Bryan Singer. Bryan Singer was fired just a few weeks before they wrapped shooting, and then they brought in Dexter Fletcher and the director of photography to basically finish out. They just didn't have that much left. You can tell by watching this movie that it doesn't feel like there were a ton of reshoots or anything like that. But yeah, this is a very complicated, kind of problem-riddled production overall. Bryan Singer, of course, is a very controversial director. Probably best known, I would say his best movie is The Usual Suspects. Some might disagree, but and the X-Men movies have kind of been his big franchise, and they've waned quite a bit in popularity. I think the last one he did, that Days of Future Past, was a big hit, and then Apocalypse, not so much. He's kind of dealing with sexual assault allegations at the moment, really getting blacklisted at this point from Hollywood. I would be very surprised if he gets attached to anything major anytime soon.
I don't think that's exactly true, because isn't he like attached to Red Sonja right now?
Yeah, but they're kind of saying it might, because he had like a breakdown or something like that during the making of Bohemian Rhapsody. There's so many rumors that we don't really know for sure. Yeah,
but it's weird because that movie, like the rumors are starting to come out, and then he got like offered like $10 million to direct that, and it was really, really bizarre.
There's a huge backlash to that for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I don't understand, like most directors don't even get that much like well-respected directors. So
this is a guy he's been dealing with stuff like this since, I remember, Days of Future Past, as recent as that movie. I remember he was dealing with like pedophilia things, and there were like young boys being invited into these parties that he was arranging and all of this stuff. But for whatever reason, this guy just, I don't know what it is, but Hollywood hasn't fully dropped him for whatever reason.
I think he actually even goes back farther to App People. Was there allegations with App People, like not only like in his personal life, like I think on set there was like misconduct involving young boys.
Yeah,
I think I remember that, but I don't know for sure, so don't quote me. But I think I remember hearing something about that.
That gets brought up like in the conversations, like whenever a new X-Men movie comes out, people are like, remember this, like we still haven't dealt with this. It's one of those things, and I'm kind of surprised that, I mean, there are a lot of people who are refusing to watch Bohemian Rhapsody for this reason, and I don't blame him. I don't blame him, because I mean, this guy, I don't see any reason to, personally, I wouldn't have saw this movie anyway. I don't feel bad about it because I mean, he did get fired, we should say. And also, there were a lot of other people involved with this movie. It's not just one person, and, you can watch this movie and support Rami Malek, who plays Freddie Mercury. You can support the rest of the cast. You can support the writers, and I mean, everybody who was involved in the making of this thing. But I also, at the same time, don't think the 20th Century Fox should get rewarded for, aiding in this problem of like really problematic directors that, I don't know. You don't need Bryan Singer to make this movie, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because I was reading a report, I believe it was from the Hollywood Reporter, and they're talking about how Bryan Singer got involved and how he got dismissed. And they were, I don't know, the producers were suggesting that like they knew about his problematic behavior, like beyond the allegations that were against him, just like as far as him, like you said, like having breakdowns on set, not showing up certain days, like being generally unreliable as far as directors are concerned. But they said like they were basically going to give him one last shot with this film because he considered it his passion project. And then like all the stuff was going on again. They were just like, we can't deal with this, so they fired him. But I don't know. The producer said, I mean, this is his words. He said that the film would not have been made if it weren't for Bryan Singer.
Well, yeah, I mean, he shot probably. I mean, the vast majority of this was shot by him. But
I mean, like it would not have gotten greenlit, I think is what he was saying, if it weren't for Bryan Singer, which may or may not have been true.
That's one person's opinion. I wouldn't take it as gospel.
I'm like I said, that's how the story ended. So I guess they give him at least a little bit of credit. But yeah, I really don't think he should have been involved in this from the get-go, and I think Fox paid the price for that enormously.
Yeah, they did. Well, that's our big Bryan Singer-sized disclaimer. Not that we won't bring it up later, but yeah, getting that out of the way. Obviously, this is a film with a lot of weird skeletons in the closet. We should also mention that Anthony McCartan and Peter Morgan did the screenplay, and as we kind of mentioned, this is a biopic about Freddie Mercury. It's also very much a biopic about the band Queen, which, it's hard to do any story about Queen without giving a lot of attention to Freddie Mercury, the front man. Possibly, most people would say, one of the most iconic musicians of all time. And so, yeah, looking at this movie, I'm actually kind of surprised that so much attention was paid on the other members of Queen, but that does make sense because it was greenlit by Jim Beach, the band's lawyer, And like I said, this movie has been in production for years and years. And one of the big reasons they had issues putting this thing together was because the other bandmates were having a lot of disagreements with the studio, and they were actually heavily involved with the direction of this story. Although I believe initially they wanted to do a Queen biopic that only had Freddie Mercury in it for about a third of the movie, and a lot of the movie,
half, I believe.
Maybe I've heard it ranged everywhere from like 20 to 35% or something like that. And then it maybe they were negotiating, and then because a lot of it was gonna be about the aftermath of Freddie Mercury's death and what happened to Queen after Freddie Mercury passed away, and then obviously nobody was greenlighting that because they just felt like it couldn't be something like that.
Right. Well, I mean, I believe. Sacha Baron Cohen was talking about this on Howard Stern, and this was a couple years ago, and he was saying that because he was attached to the project for quite a while, I believe, like 4 or 6 years.
He was he was on it for 2 years, and then he dropped out.
Are you sure? I thought it was actually longer than that.
It was
I think
2
it was
years.
Closer to 4.
Well, because it was because Rami Malek got hired for it in like 2016, and I think Cohen was announced in 2014. If I'm remembering correctly.
I thought it was actually closer to 2010 that he was circling the project. But again, like I don't know, this project's had such a long process. But anyway, I just remember he said that the reason he left, or the reason he considered the project not worth pursuing, was because the other members of Queen were just saying, like, we have this amazing idea for a story. We're going to have Freddie Mercury die halfway through. It's like, oh, is this going to be like a Pulp Fiction thing where like the beginnings? And like, no. Normal movie.
Right. Yeah.
Like, we'll just quit. And he's like, nobody cares about what happened to the rest of the band once Freddie Mercury is gone. Like, they just care about Freddie Mercury's story. And so I would say the proof is in the pudding with this film, but we can talk about that later.
Yeah, we will. And we should also say one of the reasons, I think Sacha Baron Cohen has also said that he had issues with, that they wanted to make this more PG-13,
right?
More
yeah,
sanitized version. Yeah.
Yeah, he was concerned.
He wanted it to be like
he was concerned because they weren't looking to pursue his sexuality as much as he wanted the story to pursue that, which I think is also fairly seen here, I guess, by the film's reluctance to really show Freddie's sexuality.
Yeah.
But we're kind of getting into our thoughts already. So.
We are a little bit. Let's cut to the chase here. The cast, as we've mentioned, Rami Malek plays Freddie Mercury. Rami Malek, you might remember from Mr. Robots. He's also been in, I think, a few movies at this point. I'm blanking on like what the last thing he was in was, but best
Need
known
for
for
Speed
Mr. Robot
and Night at the Museum 1 through 3.
There was also, if you recall, the video game Until Dawn. He has a role in that. But I would argue that this movie kind of has catapulted him to getting recognized quite a bit, depending on how the movie does financially. So this is definitely more recognition for him. But he has won Emmys for his performance on Mr. Robot. That said, so it's a movie about Queen. Will, you and I talked quite a lot. Why don't we let Maverick Hines go first? You want to?
Do you mean it? Am I allowed?
Why not?
Yeah. So this was a movie that was, let me, fact check me on this, but I think it was 7 hours long. Is that right? 8 hours?
I believe it's
2 hours
135 minutes.
It is, yeah. So 2 hours, 15, 2 hours, yeah.
Sorry, I was just talking about what it felt like.
And it feels like every minute of that.
Yeah,
sure.
no. So my biggest complaint with this movie was that like it was, I shouldn't say my biggest because it's not my biggest, but the most notable one for me was like it felt so. I hate to go so negative so quickly, but like I was just like, come on, like let's move on. It was so slow and it took forever, and I felt every single second of those 2 hours and 15 minutes or whatever it was. So that's my biggest thing to start off the bat is I feel like they could have made, for a story that focuses so much on such an exciting and vibrant and iconic human being, so much of what they showed for him was like okay, and I get that like it can't be all bells and whistles all the time, and like everyone's got ups and downs and stuff like that, and I understand that and I respect that, but the movie could have been more exciting or at least easier to watch in those times for me. Also, I have a major issue with how downplayed the sexuality part of it was. Will kind of alluded to that earlier, but this movie was more scared of homosexuals than the Republican National. Like it was just insane. It was just like
there's literally I see. I've heard this before too. I don't see that at all.
They don't even
I don't
like,
understand.
bring it up until like well over halfway into the movie.
That's not true at all.
Yeah, it is.
No,
Like,
it's about
Well,
30, 40 minutes in of a 2 hour and 10-minute movie. Yeah, at that point, you have him explicit. I mean, there's explicit homosexuality in this movie. I don't understand why
I
it's
wouldn't
being
say
called.
explicit homosexuality at
You
all.
have-
He says, I might be bi, and then she's like, no, you're gay, and that's the first time we ever talk about it. And then it doesn't come up again for like another 25
You're talking
minutes.
about talking about it, but there's clear scenes of him engaging in homosexual activity,
Him
physical
looking at a
contact
trucker
between him
in a
and his
gas station who
partners.
goes and think like he doesn't
Yeah, he
even
does
kiss
that,
a guy.
and he kissed a guy once. And
You
he, like,
also
tapped
don't
the
see
guy in the
him,
butt.
but you
That's about
also
it.
don't see him and his female love interest actually doing anything explicit. It's a PG-13 movie.
I'm not. Well, I mean,
don't
you're the one who
understand
said
why we're
explicit. That's
faulting
what
it.
I'm saying. I was just saying that there's no explicit stuff for homosexuality. He's not like it shies away from it for so long. They talk about it eventually, whatever. Up until that point, he like looks at a couple guys, kind of like, you can see there's kind of an internal conflict with him in this portrayal of him.
But that's kind
other
of-
than that, that's it. And
That's
they-
apparently true to life, though, is that he didn't really start to be more flamboyant and start to actually.
Which is fine,
more
but
obvious about
even
it in the late
after that
70s.
point, they make it seem like his homosexuality was such a hindrance on his life, and they portray it like he was like hiding from himself for so long, and it hurt him when he was such a like proud, iconic, like LGBTQ member, and it was ridiculous. I didn't like
Yeah.
it at all. It drove me crazy. I was just like
I could not disagree more. I
I'm,
seriously don't see that at all.
I'm more on Maverick's side of this because I feel like it's really weird because like the movie has a weirdly like heteronormative view
No,
of
it
his
does
sexuality.
not.
Yes, it does
actually
because
Totally
it
does.
goes
because-
into.
yeah, hang on.
Okay.
The film suggests, maybe not directly, but through the film's lens, that like he has a fairly well-adjusted life when he is with his female partner.
exactly.
And when he goes and
What?
accepts his homosexuality lifestyle, that's when things in the
No,
in the
that
film's
is
view
not what is
falls apart.
No, that is when he starts to lose him. Okay. It's hard because we can't talk about this without delving into spoilers, but there is a significant part of the movie where when he's with her, they don't make it so that they're saying him being heteronormative is a bad thing because she means so much to him in a different nuanced kind of way. And what you're talking about, there's nuance between like him feeling accepted by a woman that he doesn't feel like he really belongs with in that way. There's a difference between that and then him being under the influence of Paul, I forget his last name.
Yeah, I forget too. I was going to bring it up.
Who was taking him down a road that was kind of poisoning him against his bandmates, and it was kind of pushing him away from the people who cared about him. And that, to me, like the movie directly refutes that it's saying something negative
Paul
about his
Prenter.
homosexuality because of where he ends up and who he ends up with. It doesn't shy away from that. It doesn't pretend that was what was wrong with him. The whole, I mean, I don't want to get into like specific details, but I think you guys are completely misreading this film's text and subtext when regarding homosexuality. I don't think it's saying anything negative whatsoever about Freddie Mercury's struggle with sexual identity and the difference between his private life and who he was on stage. I think it was accurately portrayed and impeccably portrayed by Rami Malek. And I just don't think, of all of the film's problems, I don't think that's one of them.
I don't have any issue with Rami's performance of Freddie Mercury. I think that was actually one of the highlights of the film for me. I think he did pretty decently with it. But I'm not talking about his performance of Freddie Mercury in that. I'm saying what the movie is doing to him in that thing. And I think Will said it well. Like when he's, and I understand that Paul Prenter, I just said his name and I already forgot it. That whole side of it was, like that was more about that person than him being a homosexual. But the movie doesn't kind of lend a hand for you to feel otherwise. It's like exactly like Will said, when he's with his wife or his lady friend or whatever, everything's fine. The moment he kind of like starts to delve into that side of it,
sorry, they show that he has issues with the lifestyle that he has with Lucy Boynton's character Mary Austin. Obviously like he's cheating on her, and like this happens pretty early on in the film. Clearly he's not actually happy with her in all of those ways. Like I don't see that reading, and I'm sorry I keep cutting you off. It's just I just think that this is completely wrong. I don't think that's what this movie is.
Go ahead, Will.
Yeah, I was gonna say I think the problem isn't so much what the film is trying to do; it's what the film refuses to do. You see, because like the film really wants to be like an all audience, like for the people who like go to sports stadiums and hear "We Will Rock You," and they don't want to really hear. They just want to hear like the songs, right? They don't want to explore the personal life of this guy, and the film's kind of appealing to everyone. But by refusing to explore one of the most prominent LGBT figures in pop culture history
of his time
film,
as well.
Yes, exactly.
It does.
The film is robbing us of that full story, and the fact that the film refuses to be anything deeper than a surface level look at the band, that's where the problems are coming in, because the way the film is structured, it's not, I don't think, intentionally trying to do what we're saying the film does, but the fact that the film refuses to really go deeper, the fact that the film refuses to do anything more than some of its parts, that's where the problems are coming in, because this is what the film is allowing, these readings of the film of itself, because it's not going deep enough into someone who is complicated and fairly challenging and nuanced as a character. It's just looking at him in the most like superficial way, and that's where the problems are coming in.
I couldn't agree more.
I just completely disagree. I don't think it's superficial. I think it accurately and fully explores what he was going through the late 70s, early 80s. I don't understand like what more the move, like what's missing for you, because it clearly shows what his lifestyle was. It shows his flamboyance on stage. It shows him not just flirting with people in general, but also just, you know, when he was going to clubs, when he was having big parties, when he was engaging in homosexual relationships left and right. If there's anything that I would criticize a little bit, it was that it made a lot of that feel more hedonistic in some cases, because he did have like private boyfriends at times, and it sort of makes it, because the film has to, you know, play up his ultimate dramatic relationship with Jim Hutton, which the film doesn't do in a perfect way, because I think they kind of save it all kind of toward the end. And they kind of, this film takes huge creative liberties with like real life, obviously. But I don't see like what go deeper in what way, because the film, I think what Rami Malek is doing here is showing all the nuance. It is showing this very complicated person who was flamboyant in public, who was a different person on stage, but who also, you know, they show him going to the clubs. They show him, you know, kissing men and being with men and doing things with men and taking drugs and drinking too much and going through all of these fits. And so I watch this movie and I see that, and then I'm hearing it doesn't do enough. What I don't understand. Like, I don't understand like what's missing so much that it's offending people to this extent, because we're going around all the other criticisms of this film, but that is just one thing that is kind of boggling my mind. I just don't see it.
Here's the thing. None of us, Maverick and I, are not criticizing Rami Malek's performance. We both agree that he's good. I think he's fantastic in the film. I think his performance is outstanding. I think the way that he captures the mannerisms and nuances, like you said, of Freddie Mercury, I think that saves a lot of the film.
He really channels, yeah.
But I think the film itself cannot overcome its own limitations. Like, I think he can only do so much to make this film worthwhile. And I think there's a lot that he can do. I think his performance shouldn't be overlooked, certainly. I think he does an incredible performance, and that's not what we're criticizing. We're criticizing the film's refusal to go into the stuff that we're talking about. So I just wanted to make sure that
I think our disagreement is, I think it does. And I guess we just aren't aligning.
I think the movie, if anything, just kind of lightly touches those topics, but it doesn't want to go into them any deeper. I don't know why. I don't know what reason, if it's just because they're afraid to, as like a studio, producers, or whomever. But I think the movie is being robbed, like I said, of it, because it's not willing to go. Like, I mean, yeah, it suggests these things. Yeah, sure, it does. It does
more than suggest. I think like it depicts it. It shows it. It takes you through it.
I don't understand
why it really. I mean, it just it feels like comfort food. Like, it just doesn't feel like we're getting like, I really don't think I knew more about Freddie Mercury than I did coming in. Except the only thing I really learned, I think, about Freddie Mercury from this film was that he had like an extra tooth or something in the back of his thing, so that's how he could like project louder.
I mean, I already
that's like
that.
The only thing, honestly, I think that I learned about Freddie Mercury from watching this film. So if this film is meant to be like the inside story about how Queen came to be and whatnot, then it fails. Like, in my opinion, it fails because I don't really feel like I got to learn anything about Queen the band. I just feel like I got like basically their most popular songs kind of ushered into like a Mamma Mia-esque musical, and I know you're going to take offense to that, but I think, and I'm exaggerating a little bit, because the movie does try a little bit more than I think Mamma Mia to be somewhat deep and complex, but at the same time, I think the film is really just scratching the surface of what it could be, and I think that's more the producers, the remaining members of Queen, who have basically compromised the film from being what it could have been, which I think is ultimately the biggest tragedy of this film.
There are two things that I learned from this film, and we haven't really done our typical like you go sort of thing, because
it's spicy in here, bro.
it's a
Hot
little
takes.
spicy.
It's spicy.
I should say before I get into the two things I learned about this band, Queen means a lot to me. It's one of my favorite bands. I mean, I grew like I can look at like all the chapters of my life, and a Queen song is instrumental, no pun intended, in all of them. My favorite song ever is Bohemian Rhapsody, and to an extent, like I'm one of those Queen fans who doesn't pretend that like every Queen album was amazing. I think a lot of Queen songs weren't very good. But I am like a lot of their really great hits are very deeply personal to me, and I will fight all day about the things that I hold true about Freddie Mercury's career, and I feel like I did know a lot about this story going into the movie. That said, one thing that never really crystallized for me, I always got that Freddie Mercury was a very introverted person who I always got the sense that like when all of that stuff he was doing on stage was a bit of an act. And what this movie I think smartly illuminates is that he was trying to show the side of himself that he couldn't really do off of the stage. And I think the movie actually almost brilliantly depicts that and sends that message of like who this guy was, and that's what made him tick. And another thing that I'd never really got the sense before was that him and his bandmates were more responsible collectively for the work of Queen than I initially had always assumed. I'd always assumed that Freddie Mercury was really the show here, and a lot of people do. And you can say that like this movie is compromised by the bandmates because they were so heavily involved, but it is true that Brian May is an amazing guitarist. There's a reason that all of the members of Queen are in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And what made Queen such a unique band was that every single one of these bandmates actually contribute. Like they wrote songs individually. They were a big reason why this band works, and a big theme of this movie, outside of Freddie Mercury's private life, which I appreciated this movie did delve into, not super deep, but enough to fit into a 2-hour movie, is the fact that these guys, they needed each other. It wasn't this sort of thing where like Freddie Mercury could just go off and do his own thing. In fact, it's factually inaccurate that he went off to go solo at first. I think Roger Taylor did a solo album before Freddie Mercury did.
They all did their own albums before Freddie Mercury, so the film is fundamentally dishonest in that regard.
It takes creative liberties and it rises up the stakes. You can tell that the bandmates are trying to
more than creative liberties, but yeah, go ahead.
I don't think in a lot of cases where it takes creative liberties, I think it's doing it for dramatic effect in a way that doesn't actually, I don't think is harmful to the spirit of the band. The only thing that I think is a little annoying is the fact that, okay, the whole CBS Records thing and Freddie going solo, but a lot of it did feel like Freddie Mercury was pushing them out. You might hear some interviews where Brian May talks about that. It's not as if Freddie Mercury is blameless. So I think at least the movie is sort of taking the side of like all of these guys needed to take a break from each other, and their reunion at Live Aid is what counts. And I think that is important. And I think that's where the movie kind of really works, is like depicting that story. So those are the things that I kind of learned. And then I also learned that Freddie Mercury was a guy who just wanted to be loved. And it's not that I didn't know that already, but it was something that I had
He made
kind
a song
of forgotten.
called Somebody to Love.
No, but what I'm trying to say is like, it really echoed into like with the bandmates being so close to him. I don't think that's something that I'd always assumed it was because it was only connected to the fact that like he didn't have somebody like romantically, but it was more than that. It was also his friends and family and being more isolated. And as far as I know, I mean, that is pretty true to life. He did kind of feel alone for a significant chunk of his life and didn't really like let his bandmates in until a certain point. So that's my spiel. And I liked Bohemian Rhapsody. I think it was pretty good.
Well, I mean, I'm glad you liked the film. I mean, you seem to be in the minority, and I'm not saying that among us. I mean, just in general, there are a lot of people who are critical of the film, and I'm glad you at least got something out of it. But for me, I think, and I mean, I have to assume Maverick is a big fan of Queen as well. But I mean, I think we're all fans of Queen. Like, I don't know anyone who isn't a fan of Queen. But to me, I think the fact that the film is, in my opinion, so dishonest about the band is an injustice. I think the fact the film isn't willing to really do anything beyond just kind of play the hits. And I really don't think, as far as the other members of Queen, I don't really think I got to know them that well after this film. Like, they tried to make their image look better, certainly. I think to the point where they made their leader, Freddie Mercury, look worse in comparison. And I think that is infuriating. But I think just the fact that the movie isn't like, it just wants to be like a pop rock studio film, which is fine. If that's all they wanted to be, however, then why didn't you just make a Live Aid film? Like, why didn't you just make a film about them going on Live Aid? They could play all the favorite hits and stuff, and then that would cover the job. Like, I don't get why they did a biopic and really just kind of touch on this stuff very briefly or very lightly. Like, the movie is so long, like Maverick said, and yet I just don't feel like it that has that much in it. Like, I feel like it touches on a lot of stuff. It dwells into it very briefly, but I think the scheme of the film is very light. I think the film doesn't have a lot of like a lot of text to it. And I think if the movie really wants to be a biopic on Freddie Mercury, then it has to like be deeper. It has to be smarter than this. And I think they just wanted to make like a conventional, happy, like basically like the type of movie that Walk Hard makes fun of. And okay, fine. If that's the case, they just want to be like an entertaining crowd pleaser, then yeah, I think the best way would have been just to make a movie about Live Aid. Because otherwise, then they're just letting everyone down. Or at least they're letting me down.
Yeah, I mean, Will and I are pretty in line for the most part. I think for a movie that was this long, we missed out on so much. I don't think I would have complained as much about the length of the movie or felt it if I felt like what I was seeing on screen or what we were, kind of going through on the movie felt like it meant much, or if they were, like Will said, just tackling things in a more honest and deeper way. I will say that the one thing I really want to commend this movie on is I do think that final, that kind of climax where we see the Live Aid performance is pretty fantastic. Like, I mean, it's great, because it's just what the movie is, right? It's just the hits. It's them playing the thing. It's the music. It's great. And it's really, really fun. And I don't think a lot of people, I've seen videos of the Live Aid performance before. It's considered one of the best performances by a band ever. Like, it's like what people want to be, and it shows how great Freddie Mercury was at controlling a crowd and like just who he was. So I love that part of it. I think that's like that's the highlight of the movie for me by far. Rami Malek is fantastic in his performance of Freddie Mercury there. Obviously, they have to skim it down, right? I don't think they're going to show the full 20-minute session there. But if they would have done that and cut a few minutes off otherwise, I would have rather watched like that be 20 minutes of just that ending. But that was a really cool part of the movie, and I just wanted to throw some positivity out there for a second and kind of balance this out. But I thought that was great.
I can throw out some negativity. I mean, my biggest issues with this movie, what holds it back from being like, I think with the Rami Malek performance and the fact that you have a story here, you have an icon who you have the most unconventional person. You kind of do need a movie that's a little bit riskier, that's a little bit more like closer to something like Love and Mercy, which was a really good look at Brian Wilson in kind of in a way that didn't rely too much on gimmicks for musical biopics. And I did feel it. Like, I felt like watching this movie, I was like, why does it have to go all of these familiar beats? Ultimately, I think it does work because I don't think it's trying to be anything more than a crowd pleaser with some interesting downbeats about Freddie Mercury, and that's fine. But it did trip me up because there were some scenes that they really gloss over periods of like Queen's time that I was like, I really wanted to see. I wanted to see more of the struggle in between the Smile days and then Killer Queen. I mean, that's a big period of time when this band was really struggling, but they sort of just jumped to Killer Queen and like that big hit, and then you didn't really feel like the band's like coming together, and like that transformation, that evolution doesn't really come through. And then they spend a lot of time obviously in the late 70s, and that's when Bohemian Rhapsody of course was made. And I don't think that it's amazing filmmaking or anything like that. It's not. There are some montages here. There's some of those like you've seen it a million times before of like, oh, we're just gonna riff together, and like Another One Bites the Dust is gonna get written in like 10 seconds, and then we're gonna do, I have this great idea, the audience is gonna. That was completely factually inaccurate. If I recall, I think that was like, that song came out way before when the movie is on the timeline. And ultimately it doesn't bug me that much, so much as it does kind of bum me out because we could have had like a masterpiece here. Like, we really, like with Freddie Mercury and this Rami Malek performance, you could have had like one of the best biopics of all time. Instead, I think it's like a better than mediocre kind of decent and really has its moments, kind of fun ride with a really great performance that, you take it or leave it kind of thing.
This movie was severely held back from its PG-13 rating. I think if we would have gotten a rated R, like true, more, it was a 70s rock band. Like, we're missing a lot of context of like how wild these people were.
You have to use your imagination. For
yeah.
sure.
And I think that, go ahead, Will.
I was gonna say, I don't even think they do drugs in the film, right?
They do.
No,
Well, I mean,
they don't do any. They like,
Yeah.
there's some on the table. Oh, someone said the word drugs. And like, that's kind of the stuff that I think I was talking about earlier, where like, they don't actually ever show anything. It's always kind of like, you have to
show him high.
You have
show
to
him
guess. Well, yeah, he's like
the important stuff. I don't know.
But I'm just saying, I think we missed a lot from this rating. And I think if, like you said, with Rami Malek being there as Freddie Mercury, and we had a little bit more leeway to be crazy and to be a true, like a mid-70s rock band that was at the top of the game, I think it would have been, like you said, a potential masterpiece, like a great biopic. You know what I mean? Like, think of how, I'm not saying that Straight Outta Compton was like a masterpiece by any means, but I think we benefited a lot from the fact that we saw what was really happening, and we weren't scared to like talk about the fact that Easy, was sleeping with everybody and had AIDS,
the lyrics of those songs,
stuff like that.
I was worried going into this movie. I was scared because I thought that it was really going to shy away from how flamboyant Freddie Mercury really was, and the fact that he flirted with people all the time, and like his stage presence, and like, and not just his stage presence, but when he was off stage. And I was kind of delighted to see that they really showed a version of him that felt like, this is the Queen that I always read about and watched interviews of and heard about through like his bandmates. And I guess like it bums me out because I feel like people are saying it's not true enough. And I guess I'm pretty happy with what we got, because I was expecting way worse. And I'm assuming it has something to do maybe with expectations too. But I know, Will, you didn't have high expectations going into this one, and rightfully so. Not to knock you down or anything like that.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'll agree with you that it is slightly better than I thought it was going to be, but I don't think the stuff that it does well is good enough for me to give it brownie points. Besides the fact that Rami Malek, like you said, is just fantastic, and I think if anything, I'm just mad that his performance is not in a better film. Like, I think more so than you, like I think he's so brilliant in this performance that I really wish it was in a better film, like a film that better serviced the character, that better allowed us to see who Freddie Mercury really was, as opposed to what is ultimately just kind of like a brief peek into who he was. I just don't think this movie really does any justice to Queen. I'm glad you brought up Straight Outta Compton, Maverick, because I think that's a great example of like a maybe not conventional, but an entertaining crowd pleaser, blockbuster type film that still, I think, ultimately gets what that group is about. Whereas this film, I feel like it only just kind of skims the surface. Like I said, I just don't think it really captures what I think is one of the best rock bands ever. And so I don't know. I'm just really disappointed, truth be told.
Will, what's your favorite Queen song?
Well, I do think Bohemian Rhapsody is their masterpiece, but I think my favorite is Don't Stop Me Now.
Cool.
I love
which is not.
They do call you Mr. Fahrenheit.
Which I think actually, like the end credits, that was like one of my favorite parts when we actually just got to see Freddie Mercury be Freddie Mercury. I was like, oh yeah,
it was
this is what I wanted.
Well, you got that the whole movie, Will. You just said Rami Malek did a great job.
He did, yeah.
And I thought Lucy Boynton, love seeing her in more films popping up this year. Of course, first time I remember seeing her was in Sing Street. And in general,
you love Sing Street.
I do love Sing Street. I watch it at least once or 3 times, maybe 5 times a year.
And this is the point where I bring up Mike Myers. I thought he did all right. I mean,
I love that scene. I know a lot of people hate that scene. It is so over the top. It is so on the nose, but I was so into it.
I didn't really care for the writing, but I thought he was fine. I was more than anything, I was just happy to see him on the big screen again, because it was the first time I'd seen him in a theater since Inglourious Basterds in 2009. So it was like, hey, Dad's here. Hey, look at that.
I know, the Wayne's World reference, we should say with Wayne's World, I think that movie, that movie is probably the reason Bohemian Rhapsody, like when I was growing up, was such a thing. We all knew that song. Like, we all knew We Will Rock You. Like, I remember when I was a kid, we were playing that song and like doing that thing.
You just punched your phone.
I did. Die, phone. We were doing that thing like because it was like it was the sports anthem, you know. It was all of that, like "We Are the Champions." Like I remember Mighty Ducks kind of made like that was like when we first were hearing Queen songs when I was growing up. But Bohemian Rhapsody, like that song really clicked for me because of Wayne's World, and I think for a lot of people growing up in the '90s. So I did actually like this movie paid some tribute to that.
And I think that's going to the fact that I think more so than a lot of other bands, like there is something very cinematic about Queen. I mean, not only the fact they're very operatic in their sound, like I think just they've been ingrained in cinema for at least two decades, I'd say. So I think like it was inevitable that we were going to get this film. I just wish it was a better film and one that paid better tribute to Freddie Mercury, but alas, oh well.
Well, let's swerve into your final thoughts. That sounds like a pretty good way for you to end it, but anything else? And then what's your grid?
Well, I guess the only thing I was going to say is I think probably the better version of this film would have been, I guess, like maybe Velvet Underground Velvet Goldmine, with Ewan McGregor. I guess that probably is closer to what I think the film should have been, but ultimately, I don't think I have much else to say. I mean, I just really wish it was better, but I do think there's going to be some crowd-pleasing potential for it. I mean, if people like the film for what it is, then fine. But ultimately, I really don't think this is the best film we could have gotten any measure whatsoever.
No, we could definitely agree on
What was your grade?
Oh, sorry. I'll give it a C- just because I think Rami Malek is good enough that I think his performance makes a lot of the weaker moments of the film better. So yeah, I'll give it a C-.
Yeah, and I think what you said is right. I think it's got some crowd-pleasing elements. I mean, in Rotten Tomatoes, it's like 53% for the critic score, but 90-something% for the...
It's 59% on Rotten Tomatoes.
Yeah, for critic score, but like the audience review score is like 90-something.
Right, which... Yeah, audiences love it. And I think critics are more mixed, which... Yeah.
And I Will, you and I have been very much probably the most in agreement we've ever been. Ring the bell for something.
Yeah. We gonna make out?
Yeah, I mean, I'm down. Well, it'll be more graphic than the movie was. Got him. Okay. Anyway, my big issue obviously is the portrayal of Freddie's private life and the stuff that we talked about there. And I know that John adamantly disagrees, and it's okay to be wrong once, John. It's just like, all right, this is your time to take the L, and it's fine. All right, Anyway, I do think this movie is going to have some pretty generic crowd pleasing stuff, like Will said. I think people are going to like it. It's a 2.5 hour greatest hits track, so there's a lot to like there, listening to one of the best band's songs and seeing at least some insight for people who might not know as much about the band as we seem to all three know going into the movie, right? So if you don't know much about it, it could be a fun entrance, and then obviously when you do some more research afterwards, if you want to, you'll find maybe some of the flaws and some more details.
There's some great documentaries out there about Queen, yeah.
Absolutely. It's hard not to with a guy like Freddie Mercury, obviously, but yeah, so I think it's got something for everybody. I can't stress enough how much I loved that final Live Aid performance.
We watched the actual performance right before this.
Yeah, and I'd watched it before the movie too because I was so stoked. So nice. There's that. So I'm a little bit higher of a grade than you will, just because I do think in general it's got some more crowd pleasing elements to it. I'm a B- or C+. I'm still kind of caught in between the two.
That's way higher than I was expecting.
Yeah, I was gonna say I was expecting more like C+. I didn't expect C+.
I'm probably more C+, but I think just because like me would be a C+, but I think just like the movie deserves a B- because of what I think most people are going to get from it. That's where I'm at.
Yeah, I mean, good for me to get into. I really think this is a crowd pleaser. We've said it a billion times, and I think that a lot of people are going to like this film, and I think deservedly so. I think it's by the numbers, which is unfortunate. For such an experimental band, it kind of begs for a more experimental movie. I hope that one day it gets that, and I don't think it probably won't get that until maybe the next generation is going to put together something that really captures the full picture of the band in the way that you guys are asking for, and that would be great.
Away from Queen's influence, probably.
Probably, yeah. I mean, it is pretty soon to the band's influence, and at this point, one thing we didn't mention is that the band kind of quarrels and contradicts quite a lot. It's a big reason why there are some creative liberties, is because sometimes some people don't really agree on like the way certain things happened, and including with how the band was formed and all that stuff. I do think that it is impressive that they fit so much of a 20-year career into this movie, and I kind of like that they didn't focus too much on songs that weren't greatest hits, because this is one of the best rock bands because so many of their songs are so great. Like there are so many, like it is one of those movies that actually sort of deserves to be a bit of a jukebox, because they do play, in the background, a couple of things that some people might think is a little bit more obscure, maybe. But yeah, obviously, like if you remotely like Queen, you're going to recognize every single song here. And I think if any band deserves that, it's Queen. And I think we're all in agreement with Rami Malek. And I just think that this is it's a good movie. It bums me out too that it isn't as not a little bit better, but amazing, because it could have been. And but yeah, we definitely don't agree on like some really specific things, which hopefully we'll resolve in a future conversation at some point, because maybe more watchings of this film will resolve some of those tensions and some of those disagreements. But yeah, where I'm at, I actually was genuinely surprised with a lot of the things that they did that I wasn't expecting the movie to do well, and including giving proper credit to the bandmates. Obviously, they had an influence on that, but I do think it's deserved, and I do think that it is a movie that is really about Queen. A lot of it obviously is about Freddie Mercury, and they make a point about that. Part of the movie is about the fact that Freddie Mercury cast such a huge shadow, but it also dives into the fact that he needed them as much as they needed him. And that, I think, based on everything I know about Queen, that is totally true. And I have a lot of respect for this band. And I think it's a great movie to watch, whether you're a big fan or if you're someone who could use a good introduction. Maybe you only know a few of the greatest hits. I think this is a great way to sort of get the cliff notes, like you were saying, Maverick, of like, okay, here's basically how it happened. Watch some documentaries that they'll tell you what actually happened, and you'll get a better picture of it. But yeah, I think this is one that people should go see if they have any interest in it. I give it a B.
Boom.
Actually, I have one more positive thing to say. I'll end it on a good note.
There we go.
I did like any scene that involved like the actual making of the music. Maybe not the Another One Bites the Dust scene, because I thought that was a bit trite. But like the actual
the songwriting scenes and stuff.
Well, no, like how they would show like putting the quarters on the drum and like the making of Bohemian Rhapsody with the Galileos. I think that stuff was interesting.
Fun, and I'm glad that they paid tribute to like Roger's falsetto, because that is totally true. And
sure, like I think the stuff anytime they're actually like making the songs that we love, I think that stuff is generally fine. Like I think so, like the stuff with Bohemian Rhapsody is probably the best part, obviously, because that's the title of the movie. But I would say that stuff was like at least that was entertaining. I'll give it that.
All right, we went pretty long on Bohemian Rhapsody, but I think it was a good conversation.
Called it.
I hope. Yeah, you did, didn't you? Okay, let's dive into our mini reviews. We have a lot to get to. Will Ashton, you saw I almost said Suspiria. That's not
Suspiria.
Suspiria.
Suspiria, like Dr. Seuss's Suspiria.
If anyone would talk about it, it would be you.
Your rock opera is going to be amazing.
Oh man,
Dr. Seuss's Suspiria. Oh man, I'm going to tweet that and credit you.
Oh,
he's not going to credit you.
I don't care.
All right, so what is this movie? Who directed it, and why should we care about it?
Yeah, so this is a remake of a very famous horror film from a very iconic horror film from the 70s, made by Dario Argentino, the same name. It's one of the like most prominent like Italian horror films of all time. It's one of the last films to be shot on Technicolor cameras. It's one of my favorite horror films of all time. So I had pretty high expectations, but the remake is made by I'm gonna probably say his name wrong, but Luca Guadagnino.
Guadagnino, yeah.
Hey, I actually got pretty close. Yeah, he's probably best. Thanks, Maverick. He is the director probably best known for Call Me by Your Name last year, as well as I Am Love and A Bigger Splash. A very prominent Italian filmmaker who has been trying to get this movie made, I believe, for about 20 years. And it's a passion project for him, and it's a film that he has been very inspired to make with Tilda Swinton. And I obviously had very high expectations going in. It got a lot of, I guess, fairly divisive responses, which actually kind of got me a little more excited because unlike the original Suspiria, which is basically, I don't know how much I can give away. Well, I guess I kind of have to say a little more than I should to explain the remake. But essentially, it's about an American who goes to Rome in order to be a part of this prestigious dance academy, and she kind of learns that there's some like witchcraft involved. And it's just kind of from her perspective learning about this. And the film dives more into that from the lens of the Cold War and just kind of this fascism that has ruined the country. And the film, in comparison to the original, it's much longer. It's much more in depth. It's much gorier. It's a lot. It's a lot. It's a big film with a lot going on. And there's the pressure in there to make the film maybe a bit too much. But I really think it's a credit to the director here that he has made, I think, a film that is basically on par, maybe even better than the original, which is high praise for me because I love original Suspiria so much. But I really think, and I want to see it again because I think you kind of need to see it at least 2 or 3 times to really absorb it all. But there is so much going on here that he is taking from the original film and making it so much grander and bolder and bleaker and more relevant and more feminist too, that I think it's such an accomplishment even for him. I mean, as much as I liked Call Me by Your Name, I do think this film is probably his masterpiece if he has one so far. I really think I feel bad because I don't want to say too much because I think this movie just needs to be experienced, but there's so much I like about it, like the cinematography, the production design. Tilda Swinton gives 3 performances in the film, and one in particular is I mean the makeup on it alone deserves an Oscar, but I think her performance, the way she captures the character's nuances and perspective, and really just the way that she carries this character, it's brilliant. And I think that's also can be said for Dakota Fanning, who takes on Jessica Harper's role from the original, and she does a lot with it that I think proves that she is going to have a long career away from the 50 Shades of Grey films. Mm-hmm. As it stands, I want you guys to see the film because I think we're going to have a pretty elaborate conversation about it later, right? We're going to do like a last call.
I'm seeing it right after we record.
Tonight?
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, cool.
Wow. It's a long film, just so you know, it's close to 3 hours, so it's an experience. But I really hope everyone checks it out. It's one of my favorite movies of the year, and Tom York also gives a score that I've been haunted by ever since. Really, this film has been ingrained in me in the same way that I think Mother was last year, where it's perverse and dark and weird and grotesque and really just a beautiful little idea of a film that I think is going to stay with me for a long time. I do think it is going to be, like the original Suspiria, kind of a new cult classic in the making, and I really am excited for more people to check it out, and I hope they like it as much as I did. So I gave it an A-, and it's verging on A, but yeah, I'm really excited to talk about it. It's one of my favorites of the year. Yeah,
sounds like it might be top 5.
It's right the 2 or 3 right now, so wow. Yeah, I'm really, yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing it as well and talking about it more with you. And it's kind of crazy to see Luca Guadagnino doing 2 in a row that have gotten this much attention. So that's pretty impressive.
It's on a roll.
Yeah. All right, let's talk about a not so great film called The Nutcracker and the Four Realms. I really don't want to spend too much time on this. This is Disney's, how do we describe this? Okay. So The Nutcracker. The Nutcracker is one of the most iconic operas of all time, based on a short story by A.T.A. Hoffman. But most people know Nutcracker very much by, the music. I mean, it's pretty tremendous. Now, Disney, for some reason, they were looking at the Pirates of the Caribbean money, and then they were looking at the Lone Ranger, John Carter, not money. And
what about Alice in Wonderland here?
Well, okay, yeah. So clearly taking a cue from Alice in Wonderland, but at the same time, Alice in Wonderland feels a lot closer to the source material here, at least the animated movie, not really the Lewis Carroll story. But, the Nutcracker is sort of like taking the Alice in Wonderland fantasy formula, sort of, and some Narnia, Chronicles of Narnia, that is, and kind of doing something with it. So this movie stars Mackenzie Foy, who you may remember as Murph from Interstellar. She also played the daughter of Edward and Bella in the Twilight movies. And she plays the main character here. Matthew McFadden plays her father, kind of has a small role. Morgan Freeman is in this movie for about the same amount of time as Jeff Goldblum is in Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom, as sort of this godfather inventor character. And Helen Mirren plays the would-be villain, at least of prosthetic makeup. And of course, Keira Knightley is this sugar plum, baby-voiced character. And, I just have such a hard time putting
She
this...
has cotton candy for hair.
Yeah, a little bing bong, if you know what I mean. So,
Bing bong?
Yeah.
Bing bong.
Inside Out.
Yeah. From Inside, yeah.
It follows the story of a young girl who goes on a fantasy adventure, which really doesn't tie too closely to the Nutcracker story, really. Although they show some of the original story through, not really flashback, but sort of like almost like a side ballet, sort of, which is really when the film does ballet, that's when it's kind of decent, but yeah. And then there's an actor in here, Jaden. I'm forgetting his last name. He plays the Nutcracker in this movie, but I think his name is Jaden. Starts with an F, and I'm forgetting. But yeah, so this movie,
he was good. Oh no, I was gonna say I thought he gave a good performance.
Relative newcomer, so I don't really know too much about his other filmography. I'm not sure if he has any, but
is he like a Broadway star that is kind of making his film debut in this film?
I could see it, and if that's the case, you'd think that he'd get some singing in this.
Right? I don't know.
Definitely
I
has
don't know.
Stage presence.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like, I was wondering if he was like actually like of the stage, and they brought him on because this is like a popular stage adaptation. So, yeah, I wasn't sure about that, but yeah, he was good in the film. I actually kind of wish he was in a better film as well. But go on.
I like all of the actors here for the most part. I mean, not really Morgan Freeman at this point, but
well, I was gonna say, I mean, I don't know what the hell Keira Knightley was doing, but I mean, she seemed to be having fun.
Right. I'm not saying I like all the performances. I like all of these actors. I think Helen Mirren has been choosing terrible movies lately, but I mean, no question, she is a fantastic actress. It's just between this and Winchester and Inkheart, I guess. I don't know. I don't really understand.
She was fun in The Fate of the Furious.
I liked her in the Red movies.
Yeah, she was fun in those. I think she has fun characters. I just don't think the movies themselves that she's in recently have been very strong. But yeah, to your point, yeah, she probably needs to get a better agent at this point.
I think so. Yeah, this movie, it's not good. It's pretty not good, pretty bad, pretty everything. It was directed by Joe Johnston. Weirdly enough.
Wasn't it directed by Lasse
Hallström and Joe Johnston?
Joe Johnston did the reshoots.
Yes.
But I don't know, because this is the thing. Like, I don't get why Dexter Fletcher wasn't credited for Bohemian Rhapsody, or like Phil Lord and Chris Miller weren't credited for Solo. But like they're both credited. Like I don't get the DGA rules for that.
The DGA rules are super weird and don't make any sense. And we should say, I mean, Joe Johnston has a very interesting filmography. I mean, we've talked about him in the past. I think, between October Sky and like the first Captain America, and then you have like Jumanji and Jurassic Park 3.
Yeah,
he's all over the place.
I mean, I think he's a talented director, but I don't want to give him too much credit. I think he was more involved with like a part of production, and Lassie was like involved with the editing and like part of the filming. And sorry, yeah, but so I don't want to give Joe too much credit here, because I think he was more just like, I don't know. I mean, I don't honestly know how big of a role he was in this, but it's sizable enough to get credited, but I don't think he should get sole credit here.
Right. I think the last thing Lassie did was Dog's Purpose, which I never even saw. I mean, the last movie I think I even saw from this guy was Dear John.
Excuse me, sorry.
From 2010.
Yeah, he has a very mixed dog. I mean, he's made some brilliant films in the past.
Chocolat, What's Eating Gilbert Grape. Yeah, I mean,
With Nail and I.
Chocolat and What's Eating Gilbert Grape.
Yeah, no, but didn't he do With Nail and I?
You're talking too fast, Will Ash.
Sorry. With Nail and I, or Within and I, or how do you pronounce it? So what's that movie called? Hang on.
What is happening?
What are you talking about, Will Ashton?
I'm looking at this.
You mean An Unfinished Life?
No. I'm sorry. I'm blanking on the title of the film right now. But he did do.
He did Casanova. He did Safe Haven. Oh, that movie was terrible. The Hypnotist. Something to Talk About. That's, I think, something with Cider House.
Oh, Cider House Rules, yeah. Oh, wait, that's Bruce Robertson. I was thinking of different filmmaker. My apologies.
Okay, I was going to say, like, I don't know what, yeah.
I was thinking of With Nail and I. Have you heard that film before? It's pretty famous.
No, I've never seen it.
Oh, never mind.
He also, and we should say, Lasse Hallström directed a lot of ABBA music videos. That's probably where I first heard of him. Yeah, I mean, he directed like a ton of them. He did like Super Trooper and The Winner Takes It All. A lot of like the biggest ones.
Did not know that.
That's when he first hit my radar. That's kind of how he got his start. Was in the 70s and 80s, and then he started directing films. He directed ABBA the movie. So definitely, he's definitely one of Sweden's hardest workers. That said, he directed this film, and then Joe Johnston did the reshoots, and then you can see Lasse Hallström's like influence on some of like enabling the cinematographer and the production design to really go all out, because this movie is pretty gorgeous. Linus Sandgren, holy cow, is of gets. He was the cinematographer for First Man, and you really see that like he put everything he could into making this movie visually interesting. It's just not a good story. What do you think, Will?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have anything as far as the look of the film that I'm critical of, but I do think the story is just like, we've seen so many versions of the Nutcracker. I mean, many good, quite a few bad, and this one just feels like another adaptation of it. Like, I really got next to nothing out of the experience of watching this film besides some pretty visuals here and there. And I do, like you said earlier, I do enjoy the ballet sections, but those are fairly limited in the film, surprisingly, as far as this film is concerned. But yeah, I mean, there are a couple good things in here, but I was just so bored throughout. It just felt very rote, very much like a Disney had their hands over this and really didn't want it to be anything more than just a traditional blockbuster for Christmas for them. And I think they're going to pay the price because it doesn't seem like there's that much interest in the film, commercially or critically. But I don't know if this film is really intended for anybody, but I mean,
it does sort of feel like, yeah, they're just sort of dropping it, you know, in this period of time where like Ralph Breaks the Internet is about to come out. That's going to be Disney's big holiday animated film. And then Mary Poppins Returns is their big Christmas film. So Nutcracker, I think it's weird. They're putting it at a time that doesn't feel, you know, kind of relevant.
And I believe the social media embargo for Ralph Breaks the Internet drops today. So it seems like they're just kind of...
No, it breaks in... I have it. I was just looking at it. It's like the 14th.
I think that's the review, but the social media embargo, I think, is today.
Oh, you're right. Yeah, social media embargo is November 2nd.
It seems like Disney just kind of like, yeah, here's this Nutcracker film. Anyway, let's go back to talking about Ralph Breaks the Internet.
Yeah, because the review embargo is like 2 weeks later. Charlie Ridgely, now that you mention it, he just sent me a message on Twitter saying what he thought of Ralph Breaks the Internet because he just watched it. So, well, no spoilers. Won't tell you what he said. But yeah, anyway, Nutcracker, I really have nothing to say about this. My big thing, and I'll leave it at that, is watching this movie, I was trying to figure out, I have a lot of nieces, and they age range like crazy. The youngest is like a 1-year-old baby. One of them is like slightly older than a year. Another is 3 years old, got a 5-year-old, a 7-year-old, and a 15-year-old. I don't think I would not tell any of my sisters, any of my siblings, any of my niece's parents, I would never be like, go see the Nutcracker, because there are scenes in here that were a little too scary for the really young ones. But then the ones who are like 7 or 8 and older would be so bored by this. And it's only like an hour and a half long. So that's where I kind of judge this film, is that if I can't even recommend it for like my spectrum of, you know, siblings, kids, then yeah, I don't think this one is much of a winner. But for some reason, I did kind of at the same time see things in here that were kind of interesting, and I don't think it's offensively bad. Like, there's nothing in here where I would just be like, there was nothing in here that was so eye rolling. It was just sort of like by the numbers, and you kind of get what you get. It's kind of boring, but there's nothing offensively wrong with this. I think I'm going to borrow Will Ashton, one of your favorite criticisms, which is I had no strong feelings about it one way or the other. For once, that happened to me. Doesn't usually. So there you have it.
All I'll say after that is that there are several points in the movie where I just kept thinking about other movies,
right?
Including one that doesn't even exist. I just at one point in the film,
like the biggest burn.
There's a guy in the film that kind of looks like Bob Hoskins, and I was like, there was like a time where like a guy like Bob Hoskins was like leading films. I missed that. Like, we don't have anyone who's like Bob Hoskins besides like Danny DeVito. And then somehow that trailed into me thinking of like a movie like The Trip with Bob Hoskins and Danny DeVito. And yeah, I was amused by that for about 10 minutes. And then I was like, oh yeah, I'm watching The Nutcracker in the Four Realms. And then I got sad again. So yeah, I would give it a C-. I would say, don't waste your time.
I'm between a C- and a C. I'm trying to remember why I'm more of a C, and I think it's because I do think there's some production design here that's interesting, like the way that they get their gifts, and you know, I thought that there was some interesting stuff here with like clowns fighting each other, and like it is graciously short. At least, I guess for me, the storytelling is so weak. I mean, the whole thing, like the only kids that would get anything out of this is like you'd have to be like a very young kid whose mom has died. and because that really is what the film hangs its narrative hat on, and not in a way that feels universal at all. So like that really speaks to like why I just don't feel like I could be like, you should see this. I don't know.
I would recommend it to anyone who has never ever in their life seen a Disney movie and don't know how they play out. Otherwise, I'd say skip it. If you've seen at least one other Disney film, skip it.
All right. So that's the Nutcracker and the Four Realms, soon to be forgotten by many. Okay, Maverick Hines.
Did you bring up how there's only 2 realms in the film?
Oh, yeah, that was my big tweet. There's only 2 notable locations in the Nutcracker and the Four Realms. Okay, Haunting of Hill House, Maverick Hines.
What's up?
So this is a new Netflix show, kind of a mini series, very spooky. I've heard nothing but good things. I've heard that I need to see it. I've heard people call it masterpiece and amazing and all of this stuff. Bring us down to earth. What is it?
Haunting of Hill House. You have the info in front of you. I put my computer away, so you should probably.
I actually don't.
Shit.
No.
I just expected you to.
Well, it's directed by Mike Flanagan, who did Gerald's Game and Ouija, Origins of Evil, and Hush.
Yep.
Yeah, what he said.
And it's an adaptation of a pretty famous book, right?
Sure.
I think isn't there also like another movie or show or something with this, or is it just the book?
Well, it's
you guys want to do the review?
The author of didn't the author of this write The Lottery?
Probably.
Famous
oh
famous story of
yeah,
The Lottery. Yeah.
I love that. Was like one of the first short stories that I ever read.
I'm blanking on his name. I apologize, but I know that's his like claim to fame besides this story.
Okay.
So yeah, there's that.
Are you going to talk about the movie Maverick, or you just?
It's not
the show. Yeah.
It's not a movie. This is 10 hours of pure awesomeness. This is the first great horror series I've seen. I want to watch it again now. I finished it 2 weeks ago. Yeah, and I've kind of intentionally taken some time to think about it, stuff like that. So I want to watch it again. It's a super entertaining show. I love what this show does. You know, we follow the lives of 5 siblings in their adult lives as they're dealing with kind of the mysterious overhang from their time spent at this supposedly haunted hill house, and kind of. I've heard. I think John, you're the one who told me that there's some talks out there that this is similar to Hereditary. I didn't get that while watching it. When you brought it up, I was kind of not really following along with that. But
yeah, like shut up, John.
Well, that's just how I talk to you. That's not different.
Just want to paint a picture.
But anyway, so I don't really kind of fall in line with that, but I guess I can kind of see where people would draw that line. But anyway, that was a totally pointless anecdote. I really, really like this. I think everyone should watch it. I'm really upset that John hasn't yet because I know he's not going to, and I think you would like it a lot. The soundtrack is great.
To see it,
no, you're not. You're lying to yourself. It's fine. The soundtrack's great. The cinematography is great. The story is great. Like I just really, really love it. There's so much. I've watched so many like stupid things about it since then. Like, oh, did you notice this here? Or did you notice what these characters represent? So I'm trying really hard to make sure I don't accidentally give away information that you guys don't need just yet. It's really, really fun. It's like 10 hours of like really, really good content. And you'd think for a series, in a horror series, that it's hard to maintain, you know, kind of the suspense and stuff like that. And I think I benefited greatly from binging a lot of it. I watched like 4 episodes at a time, so it took me like only 2 or 3 days to get through it. I think if you were watching like one a day, it might be a very different experience. I think there's definitely some serious benefit to watching big chunks. I know John hasn't seen it, but you haven't seen anything either, right?
No, but I want to. I have just been busy this week, so I haven't gotten a chance to watch it. But I am planning to because I've heard it's really good, and I like the director a lot, so I'm excited.
I just wanted to make sure I wasn't like leaving you out if you wanted to add anything. But yeah, so I think that there's a lot to gain from this, and I'm really excited at the prospect of horror series that are done well becoming a more regular thing, and I hope we get more of them. Because this it just has it all. You know, it's not what I really appreciate. This is my biggest compliment I can give this show is that, you know, I've talked about it a lot on Cinemaholics here. One of my big issues with like kind of modern horror movies is like, you know, when you're about to be scared, right? Like the soundtrack goes silent. There's an overly dark corner of the room. Jump scare, right? Like, and there's a bunch of stuff like that. And I'll say that I think in 10 episodes, there's 2 like cheap jump scares in this show. And even then, I shouldn't have said cheap. They're just 2 jump scares. And even then I like them. They were what a jump scare should be. They were surprising. They were like, holy cow. And then it's over real quick. And I really appreciated that. It wasn't cheap. The horror wasn't like, yeah, okay, spooky ghost, blah, blah, blah. Like, I was invested the whole time, and it does a really good job of, I mean, there are like 6 main characters, and I don't feel like any one of them was like, oh, we should have gotten more of this, or that was too much of this, or that character is the weak one, right? Like, I hate some of the characters, but that's because they're so well written, not because of like the portrayals or what the show's doing to them. So yeah, I don't want to ramble too much, because we don't do that on this show. We don't talk too long about segments.
Oh, no, for sure. Especially about the Nutcracker.
Yeah, especially about realms. Anyway, so I think if you haven't seen it yet, please watch it. It does not need to be an October only thing. Like, this is a cool thing to watch anytime, because like I said, it doesn't fall into like the basic slasher film, horror movie, ghost movie crap. Like, it's really truly great, and I'm really excited. I don't want a season 2, but I hope the people that made this make something else and do something fun with it as well, because this was great.
Yeah. And I looked it up real quick. Shirley Jackson. Can't believe I forgot it was Shirley Jackson. You're famous, legendary author. So, wrote this in 1959.
Oh, I apologize. So. Then I might have said he, but I should have said she. I apologize.
I accept your apology on her behalf, Will.
On behalf of Shirley Jackson, I reject your apology.
Oh, well,
I tried.
Maverick, hearing that, I'm really excited for you to see Suspiria then, because it sounds like you're going to really enjoy it then, based on your thoughts on Haunting of Hill House.
Yeah, I need to see the first one before I watch the new one. I'm still...
Now I'm wondering if I should wait to see it with you, Maverick, because if it's 3 hours long...
Is it really 3 hours long?
I don't know.
Well, it's 151 minutes, so with trailers and stuff, it'll be about 3 hours.
Have fun tonight.
All right, well, that is The Haunting of Hill House. I'm definitely going to be seeing it. It's been on my list. I'm just sort of kind of waiting, once Red Dead Redemption 2 becomes less of a important part of my life. We'll see what happens.
Too busy with Cowboys.
That's right. You know me. All about them Cowboys ever since. Yeah. Anyway, Wildlife. I was going to try to tie it into the next movie I'm talking about, because it takes place in Montana, but there's no cowboys in the movie Wildlife. So.
There's more to Montana than cowboys, Jonathan.
You're right.
There's also meth. I'm kidding.
Oh wow. I've actually been to Montana.
I would apologize on behalf of all of our listeners.
Right. Yeah. I love Montana. One of my favorite states. I spent about a month and a half there for work once, and I got to go to all the different cities and counties, and not absolutely everywhere, but yeah, it's was some of the most beautiful scenery you're gonna find on earth.
My dad and uncle lived in Montana when I was younger, so I was there all the time, and until I was 17, I was like, I'm gonna move to Montana. I got accepted to Montana State University. I was gonna move there and do all.
I could see it, considering how much you love fishing.
But then Christianity ruined my. Sorry, I'm being so loose on this show tonight. Sorry.
You were gonna say
I was going to say, I have no personal relation with Montana, but I have
good,
to
because
assume
you're not talking about this movie.
It's fine. Either does John.
It's a pretty kick-ass state.
It's cool. But Montana aside, it's really just a backdrop for this movie, Wildlife.
Is it just like a character?
Huh?
Is it like a character?
It's more of the villain, honestly.
That makes sense.
Yeah, this movie is not...
I don't know why that was so funny. Will was up to defend Montana. He's like, no, not Montana. Not the villain.
I thought you were going to make an Anchorman reference. And said,
no, I was not, no.
We're eventually going to let you get to this review.
That said, this movie is based on the Richard Ford novel that was actually published the year I was born, 1990. I've actually never read the novel. I was aware of it, and... I've actually, it's weird because I've studied this novel and I've never actually read it. It's a very fascinating look at a 1960s family. I think it's actually set in the year 1960, kind of like with Bad Times at the El Royale. It's kind of like one of those decade split kind of years where clearly it sort of looks like the 50s, but you're getting into that decade. And the movie takes place in Great Falls, Montana, which again, I've been to, and very, very interesting to see it on the big screen. I don't know if I've ever seen a movie with Great Falls in it. And I really don't want to dive too much into what this movie is about. Real quick, I'll introduce the main cast. Not a huge cast here. The 4 key players are Carey Mulligan. She plays the mother, Jean Brinson. Jake Gyllenhaal plays the father, Jerry. And Ed Oxenbould is really our main character, our protagonist, Joe. We also have Bill Camp in here. Has a pretty sizable.
Oh, I love
role
Bill
in this.
Camp.
Yeah. I was surprised to see him. I didn't know he was in this movie. One notable thing about Wildlife is that it was directed by Paul Dano. Now, Paul Dano. We were talking about Love and Mercy earlier in this episode. He plays Brian Wilson, the young Brian Wilson in that. He's probably best known for his performance in There Will Be Blood, one of the best movies of the 21st century. Fantastic actor.
And Luminous Sunshine too, I think. Is
we could go through.
Yeah.
The Paul Dano filmography is vast and as vast as Montana, probably. He actually co-wrote
Montana.
He actually co-wrote this film with the beautiful Zoe Kazan. Zoe Kazan is a fantastic screenwriter. I think she has a lot to do with why this movie in particular, for a first-time director, and that's Paul Dano, this is his first film. I think a big reason this is one of the best films of the year is because of Zoe Kazan, because of this adapted screenplay. If this movie does not get an Oscar nomination for Best Adapted Screenplay, there is something wrong with the Academy. This is a fantastic film. It kind of floored me, took my breath away. It is a very simple movie. It walks you through a very tumultuous time in this young family. These Jake Gyllenhaal and Carey Mulligan, Jerry and Jean, they get married right out of high school. They have a kid. Jerry is kind of this guy who really is just sort of, trying to chase success, and Jean, and again, I'm trying not to explain too much because it is one of those movies I went into it not really knowing too much about what happens, except for some of the main beats from the novel.
I'm not even kidding. What movie is this?
Huh?
What movie are we talking about?
Wildlife?
Okay. I just forgot what movie we were talking about for a second.
I've only said it 4 times. It's funny too because it's called Wildlife, but you'd think it'd be called like Wildfire because wildfires are kind of a subplot in this. That said, this movie, a lot of it is Ed Oxenbould, who I've actually met before. I interviewed him a few years ago. You might remember him from The Visit. He was the young kid in that. He was also the main kid actor in Alexander and the Terrible, Horrible, No Good, Very Bad Day. I think he was also in that Christmas horror movie, Better Watch Out. I've always considered him like, a pretty decent child actor. In those movies, he's a little bit younger. In this movie, he's a little older. He plays a 15-year-old son who's really caught in the middle of his parents. And this kid, I shouldn't say kid, this guy, Ed Oxenbould. Young adult. He is somebody to watch. This performance, for him to pull off a performance here that is 90% reactionary, he doesn't have a lot of dialogue. A lot of this movie is him reacting to some insanely nuanced and also troubling performances from Carey Mulligan and Jake Gyllenhaal, who are 2 incredible actors. Carey Mulligan in particular, but I mean, also I think Jake Gyllenhaal is one of our, it's not understated that he's a terrific actor. I think a lot of people just sort of forget that he's one of the best actors working right now. I know the Academy has forgotten a few times. But that said, Ed Oxenbould, not just holding his own, but being the linchpin of this film. It is something to watch, this film. It takes you on this emotional walk through a life that there was so much to it you just don't see in films. A lot of it is the subject matter, but based on what I know of the novel, it really, because the novel is a lot of narration, there's no narration in this film, and it actually provides a unique angle and perspective into this story, basically about a family being ripped apart, that touched me so deeply because one small thing about it, and I shouldn't even say small. Have you ever been in a situation where your parent overshares with you? I think that's something that a lot of us can relate with, that moment when you realize not just that your parents are flawed, but that your parents are trying to, you're their only friend at one point.
They're human.
And they have to put their struggle on you. And it's such a tricky thing because I've seen it maybe once or twice in films before. It's not something that's not done super often, but when it does, it's usually over the top and it's usually very dramatic. Rarely is it just right, where it's so authentic that it hurts and it kind of cripples your gut and it makes you feel something for this young 15-year-old kid that is so unfamiliar, but also familiar at the same time. This movie it's hard to say because I don't want to go into too many spoilery directions because it is something you kind of just have to experience, but also the filmmaking here is top notch. I just think that like what this film does with like shadow, with a character being in the dark, figuratively and literally, but then when the camera turns to show like a huge sunset, it's so powerful and so it's so remarkable to see this from a first-time director, because usually a first-time director is going to be a little bit more either a bit of a showboat or maybe a bit more of a workhorse, where they're really just trying to like play it safe because it's their first movie, or they're trying to really prove themselves. Here, Paul Dano just made a movie that feels like it was his fifth and best. And that to me is remarkable. This is one of the best feature debuts I think I've ever seen, because he really just shows that he needs to keep making movies, basically. And I'd love to see more collaborations between him and Zoe Kazan, because, you know, they're a couple, you know, in real life. And you really get the sense that they know how to portray a couple as real people together. Because this is one of those movies where you don't have spouses who like one's good, one's bad. You don't have one where it's like he's the deadbeat and she's just trying to hang it in there. You just see people. And this is one of those films that like it reminds you how authentic a well-written and well-performed character can be. That's all I'm going to really get into. I know I've said a lot, but also not a lot at the same time, for reasons that I hope are obvious when people go check this one out, and people should check this out. It is a beautiful film from Diego Garcia does the cinematography. David Lang does the music. It's, you know, I don't say this lightly, but it's pitch perfect. I wouldn't change a thing. This movie is really terrific. I've been leaning between an A- and an A, and I don't know where I'm at 100% yet, but it's easily one of my favorites of the year. Could be in my top 5. And I really hope, Maverick, you and you, Will Ashton, I hope you guys check this one out, because I think you would really enjoy it.
Cool.
Yeah, I'm really excited to see this one.
Okay, that's Wildlife. Will, close us out. Boy Erased.
And you know what? Like, let's be real. Make it quick, all right? You know, I got stuff to do.
Okay.
No, I'm just kidding, buddy.
Did you write down that last film, Maverick, so you remember it?
No, I still have no idea what movie that was called.
All right. Yeah, so Boy Erased is from another actor. But
this
it's
was
not
on
his debut.
my whatever season we're in movie preview, right?
Fall, yes.
Yeah.
So this is the...
I wanted to see this, right?
Yeah.
This is the sophomore film from director Joel Edgerton. He previously made The Gift in 2015, and this film is based on a memoir. I forget who the author is off the top of my head.
Gerard Conley.
Yeah, and it's based on his
Came out
real
just a
life
couple years
story.
ago. Yeah.
What was it?
Yeah, it came out like a couple of years ago, right?
I believe so, yeah. It's fairly recent. And it's based on his teenage experience in gay conversion therapy camp. And it doesn't shy away, similar to The Miseducation of Cameron Post, it doesn't shy away from the horrors that came within and exploring them from a very human yet delicate light. And I think as a film, it's strong. I certainly think it's another showcase for how Joel Edgerton is a very promising director. Mm-hmm. However, I don't know if I love the film. I don't think I had the same issue as I had with Miseducation, Cameron Post, where I felt like Chloe, or what's her? Who was the main actress in that?
Chloe Grace Moretz.
Yeah, where I felt like her performance was weaker than the supporting cast. But at the same time, I remember thinking like there are a lot of characters in here where the supporting characters are a little more compelling than I think the lead. But as it stands, I think Lucas Hedges is very strong here. I think Joel Edgerton is very strong, as is Nicole Kidman as his mom. Mm-hmm. I think the film is certainly good about showing some very honest and real depictions of what goes on here. However, I don't think the movie is ever quite as good as it wants to be, or if it could be, I guess, because the film, I don't know, I never really got the sense that it was as good as I guess it could have been, because I'm trying to remember everything. It's been about 3 weeks since I've seen this, but I remember a lot of the time feeling like the film touches upon these very dark and brutal subjects, and there's particularly one scene in the film that is going to be very tough to watch. I think people should know that going in, and it becomes a pivotal point of the film. So it's not done for shocks. It's very relevant to what the film is talking about. But I just remember feeling kind of underwhelmed by the film, and I'm trying to remember exactly why, but I just remember something about the film didn't quite hit me as hard as I wanted it to. And I'm wondering if it's because while all the stuff in the gay conversion camp feels real and authentic, I felt like a lot of the stuff outside of it only kind of goes through the beats. Like it didn't feel like the film was often able to accomplish everything it wanted to, either because of the time frame or time length or just because of the restrictions with the rating. But ultimately, I like the film. I think I gave it a B overall, but as it stands, I do think there is probably a really, really good film about gay conversion camp and about the horrors and terrors with them. But I don't know if I quite got it from either Miseducation, Cameron Post, or Boy Race.
Movies.
So I do like the film, though. I think Maverick, you should definitely check it out if you're interested in seeing it.
Yeah, it was definitely something that was kind of personal to me that I really wanted to check out. I didn't know it had come out yet, which is the only reason I haven't seen it.
I think it just came out today. My screening was like about a month ago, but
that makes more sense.
Yeah. So, but I believe the official release date is today, and at least in limited release. I think it comes out wide next week or the week after. So,
main reason I want to see it is Troye Sivan is in it. Love his music. Was he good in this? Like, we have an acting career ahead of us.
Who did he play?
Troye Sivan. He plays the blonde kid, right? He should have like blonde hair, kind of not spiky, but kind of curly.
I'm not quite sure if I know who he was.
Right. I know Flea is in this movie.
Flea is great in this movie. Honestly,
at least there's that.
His performance is insanely good. I remember that.
Really? Okay, I thought that was gonna be an unfortunate, but
no,
okay, great.
no. Well, it's weird because like there's the opening credits of the film and it just says like at one point like with Flea, and I thought like, oh, that's weird.
Like featuring Flea.
Yeah, I just said like with Flea. Like it was just like, oh, okay, that's a weird credit. But because usually like with musicians, it's like, I don't know what his full name is, but it's like first name,
it's
like
Flea.
Quotations.
It's
he just
Flea.
legally is Flea.
It should be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
but
Flea
no, he's
Red Hot.
His performance is
that was a terrible joke. I'm so embarrassed by that.
His full name is actually Danny California. Go on.
There we go.
Okay.
Redemption. Should we get one more in and not let Will finish?
Well, I mean, I
we
know
could just keep
you wanted me
interrupting him.
Well, you do that every week anyway. Got him. Freaking solid. Go, Will. Hurry.
Will.
I'm done.
This is Will Ashton's last episode on Cinemaholics. Sorry,
I don't know what else there's to say.
I've been a wild card tonight,
So
guys.
the real boy erased was Will Ashton.
Oh. In the end, aren't we all erased?
And with that,
all right, movie's coming out next week.
Let me just blanket apologize to everyone I've pissed off in this episode.
I feel really bad because
I've
Will
said
is just
some
trying
lewd this week.
Yeah, this is rough. Welcome back, Maverick. So movie's coming out next week. The Girl in the Spider's Web, a new dragon tattoo story, the worst subtitle. Dr. Seuss's The Grinch, Overlord, The Frontrunner, and Burning hits a wider release. Now, I really want to see Burning. It's one of my most anticipated at the moment. I want to see Frontrunner, but it's not like super high on the list, and I'm not sure yet on Overlord. But the two big wide releases are The Grinch and The Girl in the Spider's Web. So patrons assemble, help us decide what to review. I have a feeling you're going to want to hear us talk about The Girl in the Spider's Web because we usually go for live action over animation in these cases. But surprise us. Let's see what you think. I kind of want to see Illumination's The Grinch.
I kind of want to see Overlord.
Yeah, I think of the three, I'd pick Overlord, but I have a feeling that the Grinch is going to win.
I just have vibes it's going to be like that. Oh, I can't remember. What was the movie with the little robot bug that controlled the dude?
The little robot.
Oh, wait. You're not talking about Ratatouille, right?
No, not the little rat.
You talking about Despicable Me?
No.
You're talking about animation? What do we...
No, not animation. Overlord, I think, is going to be like, what's that stupid movie called? We just saw it this year. He gets a thing on his spine and like...
Oh, Upgrade?
That one. There we go.
Oh, no, I don't think it looks anything like that.
No, not in story. I just mean like in that style.
Oh, still.
There we go. I can talk, man. I'm on it tonight.
Yeah, I'm not super excited about The Girl in the Spider's Web. Claire Foy being Elizabeth Salander might be interesting, but I mean, these trailers really just make it look not great. It's not a Stieg Larsson story. It was written after his death, and I don't know. It just doesn't, something about it's not clicking for me, but we'll see what happens. Dr. Seuss's The Grinch, I haven't liked an Illumination movie yet. So, I mean,
I like Sing.
I did not, you know that, and I also didn't like Secret Life of Pets. I'm sorry, Brian Lynch, and also Despicable Me movies have just never worked. But I'm hoping the Grinch changes that. I hope it's like the first one of these that I enjoy. And I mean, the Grinch is a fun little story, but we'll see. But yeah, I also want to see Overlord. That actually looks pretty interesting, and that's the World War II zombies kind of thing, weird science.
They have been given a purpose.
We'll make it. It's between those 3 movies. So if you're a supporter of Cinemaholics or you want to become one, go to our Patreon in the show notes. Become a patron, and we'll send out our weekly patron poll. Our weekly patron poll with these 3 movies. Vote which one you want to be our feature review. We'll talk about all the movies we see as usual, but which one you want to hear an in-depth review on will be up to you. All right. That'll do it for us this week. If you love our show, leave us a review on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Google Podcasts, wherever. Find our social, Facebook, Twitter pages, all that stuff in the show notes. And email us anytime if you just have something on your mind. cinemaholicspodcast@gmail.com. And with that, we'll see you next time. From the Internet, California, I'm John Negroni.
From the Internet, Pennsylvania, I'm Wash.
From the Dungeon of Sadness, I am Maverick Hines.
See you next time.